Good morning, South by. Welcome to the Passcode booth, day 2 of our speaker series. Today we have Matthew Cook from Panopticon Labs, who's going to talk about people who hack video games. You've heard about people hacking banks and hacking governments, but there's a whole new group hacking video games. Welcome, Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Ben. And I say thanks to Dell for sponsoring the booth, and thanks especially to Passcode for inviting us to speak. Thanks for everybody for coming out. My name, like you said, is Matthew Cook, and I am one of the co-founders of Panopticon Labs. Our company is the world's first in-game cybersecurity company dedicated to keeping online games safe from these guys, the world killers, the hackers, the cheaters, and the fraudsters who are in these games. So before I start though, I just want to do real quick, start with, who here watches the show The Big Bang Theory? Okay, so a lot of people. So you might remember the episode. If you don't, I'll describe it, where Leonard comes home and he finds Sheldon sitting in the living room, right? And he's like hyperventilating into a paper bag. He's got a cop there, right? And he's like, said they reported a break-in, a burglary, a robbery. And, Leonard goes, oh my God, what did they get? And Sheldon says, they got everything. They got my enchanted weapons. They got my vicious gladiator armor, my wand of untainted power, and all my gold. And Leonard sighs and he says, you called the police because somebody hacked your World of Warcraft account? He's like, they took my battle ostrich, right? So, that's pretty funny, right? But I'm here to tell you that as somebody who's worked in online fraud and cybersecurity for many years, I did this for banks before I founded the company, I can actually say that, and as somebody who's been playing these games for years, that this actually happens all the time. And it's not something that's rare either, because, in a nutshell, what we're going to talk about today is sort of why professional cyber criminals are playing video games online more than ever before. Not because the games are fun, I mean they are, but these guys play professionally because there's a business opportunity for them to commit crimes in these games, and it's very, very lucrative for them to do so. I really think, as somebody who plays these games, that these hackers, these cheaters, they are nothing less than a cancer on these games. They get into a virtual world, they eat and eat for their own good, they give nothing back to the game or to the community. And really, I've seen it happen many times. If they're not stopped, and stopped pretty quickly, they will in fact kill virtual worlds. So to understand sort of why that happens, you don't have to look too far back actually. So in December, just a few months ago, an organization called Steam, has anybody used Steam okay, a few? So if you play games on PC, you've probably come across Steam. Basically it's a big virtual marketplace for computer games. It's a great service. You can download them to your Steam client and you just have a single user ID and password. If you change your computer, you can get all your games again. It's awesome, right? A little while back, they turned on something called Steam Trading. And what Steam Trading let their players do is, as you play the games, you get these virtual items. They're like virtual trading cards, badges, and they're pretty collectible because some of them are really hard to get. And so they figured it would be a great service if they let players trade them with each other. And so that people could kind of collect them all, right, like Pokemon, and get a whole set, right? Well, what they found out is when they turned this service on, account takeover, which has actually always been an issue in Steam because, right, I mean, if you had somebody's user ID and password, you could basically play all the games in their library without buying the games. It surged, and we're not talking it surged a little bit, it went up over 2,000% as a result of turning on Steam Trading. In December, they reported that that number was 77,000 hacked accounts every single day that was happening in Steam. And it was because these bad guys were getting in, they were stealing these virtual items and they were selling them to other players on a gray market for real money. So I can kind of see some of you are like really? Like why? Why would anybody pay real money for virtual items that you can't do anything with outside of a virtual world? And to understand why that is, you have to take a quick step back and kind of understand why and how games make money now. The business model's changing very rapidly over the last few years. So like when I was a kid, my first game system was an Atari 2600, right? It was even before the Nintendo. And when I wanted to play games, I had to convince my parents to take me down to Toys R Us. I had to buy a cartridge that I stuck in. I could play the game. I could, maybe play with a friend on the couch. When I was done, I could trade that game to somebody else. But basically that was it. I was done, right? About 12, 15 years ago, games like World of Warcraft, right? So Sheldon and his Battle Ostrich, they went massively online. And so a game like this, I wasn't just playing with a friend on my couch, I was playing with thousands of other people in a true virtual world, right? And these games made money not by just selling me the game, but by charging me a subscription fee. And I paid it because it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. At that point, you couldn't buy things from the game, but there were guys like the guy who hacked Sheldon that would steal things and sell them online. Things really got nuts with mobile devices. So if you think about it, a mobile phone is more powerful than a desktop computer from just a few years ago. So now everyone that's got a mobile phone is carrying around a powerful computer in their pocket. And so what a lot of people do is the first thing they download is a game, right? And most of these games are free to play. So, free-to-play games like Game of War and Clash of Clans, right? You probably saw these advertised on the Super Bowl, right? That's how big they've gotten. They want you to download these games totally for free, play for free, and the way that they make money for their operators is they give you the option to, if you really like the game, to buy small purchases of virtual items and currency that make the game more fun. And I love this model as a player because, I can try out a game for free, and if it sucks, I don't need to pay anything for it. But if it's great, I can vote with my wallet, right? And a lot of people do this, and it makes a lot of money. And this is why these games have a fraud problem now. And here's why. Because Superdata Research, just for 2015, calculated that online games alone, not the ones that you buy on disc still for your PlayStation or your Xbox One, but the ones you download to your phone or to your computer, generated $63 billion with a B dollars in 2015. Now, to compare how much money that is, if you look at how much money Hollywood made last year worldwide, that was like only $38 billion. And so I can see it on people's faces like, wow, they think, yeah, movies, they make a lot of money. Well, games made almost twice as much. Just one publisher, Electronic Arts, reported that just optional downloads for their traditional games that were generated online, so these virtual items and virtual currency generated over $1.3 billion in revenue for one publisher in the same year. And so that is the answer to why this problem is happening, because before I found this company, I spent 15 years building tools to protect online banks, online bill pay, and online stock trading companies. And I knew from watching them turn those services on in the late 90s and early 2000s that fraudsters always follow the money. It's just business for them. They don't care where it goes. All they care is that the money is there. I saw it happen in banking. It's obviously true in e-commerce, and it's still a problem in those industries, right? But as games moved all their money online, then they attracted these fraudsters because, honestly, they're softer targets for these fraudsters who have honed their skills in much more regulated and much harder industries like online banking and online bill pay. And when you talk about these guys making money, it's more than just account takeover. I mean, that still obviously happens, like what happened to Sheldon, right? I talked to a guy a couple months ago. He's a student at Ohio State University, so our company's based in Columbus, Ohio, and we're just south of the university. And he made all of his beer and textbook money by gold farming. So what he did is he played a free-to-play game with a couple of his friends a couple times a week. They gathered virtual resources because they were good at the game, and they sold them outside the game. So these are things that the publisher was selling on their own, but they were selling them for cheaper because they had time on their hands, right? They had more time than people buying them. They made enough money to, basically buy all their beer and their textbooks doing this, right? We've talked to people, though. I talked to a guy just over the weekend who made a really good living for a number of years by botting. So this is sort of like gold farming squared, right? So what botters do is they actually write a special version of an online game that they can automate, and they can run dozens or sometimes up to 100 copies simultaneously. And then they have these automated accounts that just go through and they collect these things in mass quantities. And so these are the same items that the publishers need to sell to their players if they want to keep their games free and fun. but they're selling them in massive scale. And then of course you've got people who are true criminals, right? So these are the kind of guys who buy credit cards from, say, the recent Target breach. They go into a free-to-play game, they go into the market, and they buy as many of the virtual currency items and the virtual items as they can. Why not, right? It's not their money, they don't care. They sell them for half price online, and it's basically money laundering 101 at that point, right? Because by the time the cardholder reports the theft and something can be done about it, they're long gone. They've converted that money into currency that they can use. So it's massively rampant, it's all over the place, but sometimes I'll actually talk to people, it's like, yeah, but 63 billion, right? I mean, that's still a lot of money. Is this really a problem? Who cares, right? Well, I can tell you, as somebody who plays these games myself, players absolutely care. Because, when I go into a game that I've maybe spent my very precious free time to play, I expect all my stuff to be there. It's like, I'm not going to expect them to leave the front door to my house open. Well, I wouldn't expect the game to be unsecured either. And I want it to be fair, and I want it to be fun. And I'll tell you, I get online to play with other people and to play with my friends. I don't get online to play against a bunch of Chinese gold farming bots that are running around and spamming me in the chat channel, buy cheap gold on some shady website. And so that's why publishers absolutely, and if we have any publishers here or developers, you should care too. Because there's lots of people like me, we see it in the games, and it's very easy for us to go, you know what, this game's been overrun, there's another one just like it, it's free to play as well, I'm gonna leave, take my money with me, and I'm never gonna come back. And if they're not stopped, like I said, it is just like a cancer, they're gonna kill the virtual world. I know that this actually happens, and we actually quantified how bad it can get because one of our early customers, and I can't say who, but was a very large operator of Facebook and mobile games. I know you've heard of them, you probably got their games installed on your phone right now. They had a social casino game. If you don't know what social, anyone ever played like a social casino game like an online slots or like an online poker? In social casino, you can't cash out your chips. It's not real money gambling. But what you can do is you can spend like $100 and they'll sell you 1,000,000 chips, $1 million worth of chips. So you have the fantasy of being at a no limit Texas Hold'em and I'm gonna go all in for $1 million, right? That's fantastic if you win. But if you lose, you're bust, you gotta buy more virtual chips. That's how our customer made all their money. They had millions of players and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars every month selling these virtual casino chips to their customers. Life is good, right? Well, they also knew that when they looked around, there's dozens of unauthorized websites that were selling the exact same currency, and they were selling it for like a quarter on the dollar. And so they knew that some of their players are more motivated by money than anything. So they wondered, well, what's this really costing us and how bad is it? So we used our tools to actually study player behavior, and we quantified the entire ring. We realized that there was a very big organized ring of gray market actors who were using all the same techniques we talked about, botting, and then actual criminal activities like account takeover and credit card theft. And they generated so many virtual chips that we calculated that they were losing about 40% of their revenue, so hundreds of thousands of dollars every month to these bad actors. Now, that's bad enough when you're a big company like our customer that can absorb that loss for a while, but I'll tell you, a lot of the people we talk to, 40% of the revenue. I mean, just imagine if you're a business owner, can you afford to lose 40% every single month off the bottom? I mean, that's literally the difference between life and death. And as somebody who's seen really promising games that developers have spent years of their life working on and millions of dollars to bring to market, only to be shut down within a few months because they've effectively been strip mined by bad actors, that's just intolerable, and they can't handle that. So I don't want to be totally a bummer about this. I mean, so what can people do about this, right? So if you're a developer or a publisher and you're working on a game right now that you think is going to be, you're hoping is the next big World of Warcraft, right? I mean, start thinking about these issues now. Almost everyone we talk to, they come to us after they have a problem. And it's interesting, banks did the same thing. They knew that they were going to have a problem, but they chose, well, let's see how bad it gets before we deal with it. I'll tell you, you're going to be so far behind the curve at that point, it's going to be awful. And when I talk about thinking about these things, think beyond the obvious. So I'm not just talking about things like multi-factor authentication on the front door, or one-time passwords, or device reputation, or IP geolocation. I'm talking about actually studying this problem in the middle. A lot of the tools on the front end I actually helped develop a lot of those tools for the banks. And I can tell you, one of our customers put it perfect. They said, the problem with using bank tools to secure games is that bad guys have had years to figure out how to break them already. And so they kind of come broken right out of the box. They're going to stop some, but they're not going to stop everybody. So you really need to look at this problem as study what your players are doing, and then look for the anomalous ones, the ones who are playing unlike other people. And those are the ones you want to look at first. Also, when you talk to your credit card providers, realize that they can't see anything that happens in-game. All they see is a credit card number and a purchase amount. That's great if the card's been reported stolen to the agencies or the credit listing services, but if it's a new card, they're not going to know. And actually what our customers tell us all the time is that at the end of the month, they just basically say, okay, you made $100,000 in revenue, but we're going to claw back $40,000. They're not even going to tell them which accounts that's from. So unfortunately, a lot of times our customers are powerless to know, crap, I know this is happening. Who is it? They don't know. And because there's so much volume going on, the card providers don't even flag the accounts. And then if you're already operating a game, the best thing you can really do is assemble your team, assemble your monetization team or your fraud team or your customer service team, and ask them straight up, what's this costing us? If they can't answer that question, you get a lot of blank looks, which unfortunately happens a lot. I would probably be concerned because the first rule of metrics is you can't fix something until you can measure it. And if you can't even measure it, then you don't even know where to start. Now luckily there are tools. We have a suite of tools that do that. You can also develop on your own if you have a data science team, and a lot of game companies do now. These are problems that have been solved. There's literature out there, and I'd be glad to talk about that. I'm going to open this up for questions after I finish talking, or I can talk to you afterwards if you don't want to talk about it in public. But there are tools that can do it. The good news, though, is that there are organizations now, more and more of them, that are like us, and they're usually run by gamers like me who really take this problem personally. We want to make online games so unfriendly to fraud and so expensive for them that, remember, it's just a business opportunity for them. If it's not advantageous for them to be in games, they're going to do something else. And that's our goal, is to make that happen. Not just for our customers, but hopefully for the whole online game industry in general. So thanks very much, and I'm going to open it up if anybody has any questions.
I have a mic here, so.
Any questions?
I've got a quick one.
Yeah.
Do you think game companies in some ways created a little bit of this problem by including Easter eggs and other sort of hacks in their early games? You could, with Nintendo, you up, down, left, right, and you suddenly get all the keys to the kingdom. I mean, is there a bit of a cultural sort of built-in sensibility of the games are meant to be hacked a little bit?
Well, I think that's not a bad point, but I tell you, everybody plays games for different reasons, right? Some people are very competitive, they really want to spend a lot of time, and they've got the ability to do so, and that's great. I'm not one of those people, so I'm actually one of the target audience for people who might want to take a shortcut, I'll admit it, right? I don't have 30 hours a week to master a game. I just don't, and a lot of people don't have that ability. So these things, these shortcuts and things like that, there's definitely a reason for them to be there. And I'm not going to ding anybody for wanting to do those. If somebody can make money actually selling those to people and people are willing to pay for it, then more power to them. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, I think that maybe they did cause some of it, but it was because the players really wanted it. And I mean, it's definitely been shown that games that have those things, there's lots of players that's why they play the games, is to find those secrets, to find the little corners of a virtual world that no one else has seen. And I think that's one of the best parts of playing them, so yeah.
So, obviously in other areas of fraud, there's been a lot of engagement both by industry and law enforcement. Mm-hmm. What's going on in this space? Is it being paid attention to by banks, by law enforcement? I mean, are these the same cyber criminals that are, conducting fraud like retail fraud in other places?
Yeah, in fact, I've seen a lot of evidence. I actually have a buddy who actually works for one of the very large threat detection agencies. I actually learned about this problem when he came to me. He was doing an analysis of malware, and he said, it's weird, I'm looking at the payload of this malware, and I'm seeing more and more of them directed to gaming sites than to banks now. And why is that? Because he wasn't a gamer, he didn't get it. And it's because of this reason. So yeah, it's absolutely the same guys. In a lot of cases, they're using the same tools. Now, as far as sort of what's being done about it, most of the companies we talk to totally outsource the financial part of their game. So the credit card payments and everything else, they outsource either to Google or to Apple if they're a mobile game, or they outsource it to their card provider. Sometimes for upwards of 8 or 10% on every transaction, they pay a sort of insurance against this problem because it's so rampant. And oftentimes, yeah, they might report it as credit card fraud, but I've yet to talk to a single game operator that has ever talked about this to law enforcement. Maybe it happens, but when we talk to executives who are dealing with this problem, they're still like banks like 10 years ago. They're dealing with it totally internally, and I can absolutely tell you from a banking perspective, if banks weren't mandated to report this, most of the time they wouldn't report it either, because even when banks get taken, unless there's a huge loss, the vast majority of these crimes, even when reported, do not get investigated. And that's why it's so attractive to these bad guys, because they know, even if they're caught, they're probably not going to be prosecuted. And certainly, games, I think, have taken it seriously enough that it's been very much widespread. Now, executives are talking about it amongst themselves, though. It's a pretty small community, and I think they're starting to realize, yes, this really is a problem. We're a little bit ahead of the problem. We're trying to make sure that we can educate people that you're not alone in this problem. If you're seeing it, everybody's seeing it. It doesn't matter if the virtual goods are there and they have value, you're going to have these bad actors in the games.
If I'm developing a game now, what can I do for first steps?
So the best thing you can do, and this is actually something that a lot of developers are doing anyways, is put in tools to gather this intelligence right up front. Publishers, remember, are going to use the developers' tools to support their games. And it's going to be a lot of expensive work for them to build their own analytics tools to be able to pull this data out. A lot of people are looking at analytics because if you're a free-to-play game, it's all about how do I get players into my game and how do I get them to convert. So metrics is a big deal, and a lot of the platforms that develop games like Unity, like the new Lumberyard, have tools that are built into them to create these analytics. Most of them though are geared towards good events, like how do I convert a free-to-play player into a paying player. Almost none of them do look for the friction, the bad things. How are anomalous players actually hurting my game? How are they driving players away? It's something that most people deal with completely defensively after they have a problem. And they usually use simple tools like they'll do forensics, they'll create a set of rules to write a report. That can work, and I actually used to build tools early on for banks to do that. But they're very labor intensive, they have a lot of false positives. Really, I would recommend if you have a data scientist on your team, have them start looking at anomaly detection and behavioral analytics, because that's going to be the kind of the thin edge of the wedge to identify, just look at the players who are really anomalous. If you're a developer, especially or a publisher, you've got support people who probably really know your environment and know your players. What we hear is that if they can look at the right people, they know pretty quick that something's weird about an account, and they usually know what's going on. But if it's like one in a list of 500, you're going to burn that person out pretty quick. Instead of showing them 500, show that person like 10, and then use that to your advantage. Use the resource that you've got with metrics being built in, ideally before the game is even launched. If you can do it in beta, that's ideal. So the question was, do we have those tools? Yeah, we do actually. So our tools are not integrated into the game. We did this because in banking, if you put a tool in an online banking site, it would be reverse engineered by the end of the day, because anything that a bad guy can observe is something that they can beat. So we're completely anomalous, or outside of that. We just use log data, and ideally, if we can start getting that data in beta. A lot of companies use beta as like a marketing tool to get early players and the press to kind of like see how fun the game's going to be. Well, in your population are the bad guys, the bot herders, the people who are refining their tools so that on release day, they're going to be able to strike. So yeah, definitely start building these tools early. We've got tools like that. A lot of people try and build them their own, with their data science team. And we're always glad to answer questions about that, because as gamers ourselves, we're probably playing the games that are being released, and we want them to succeed as much as you do. Thank you, that's a great question.
All right, thank you very much, Matthew.
Right.
That was a fascinating talk.
Thanks.
We have an online quiz in the middle of the booth if you'd like to take it and learn how to be a better internet user.
Yeah.
Thank you.